Things are happening this morning. Usually we don't devote the entire Today Show to any one subject, as you know, but we were so knocked out, I guess is the word, or enchanted by Oscar Brown Jr.'s new musical, Kicks and Company, as we said, that we arranged to bring the whole thing to you this morning. So we're having a kind of a living room audition. Your living room at this hour of the morning is probably not what you expected to be as a scene for an audition, but stick around if you can the whole 2 hours, and something good will happen to you, I'll bet you.
Permit me to introduce myself. The name is Mr. Kicks. I dwell in a dark dominion away down by the river Styx. The devil has sent me here because I'm full of wicked tricks, and I'm such a popular fellow among all you lunatics. I teach a course in ruination from the devil's text to fools who can't withstand temptation. Step right up, you're next. I hail from a hot old hellhole down along the river Styx. Allow me to introduce myself. The name is Mr. Kicks. When an old wolf starts prowling out among the young lambs howling, don't you know he's looking for kicks? When a young cat full of sly tricks spends his evenings chasing fly chicks, 10 to 1 he's looking for kicks. Kicks is always in demand, 'cause Kicks is full of fun and laughter. Lots of folks get out of hand because it's only Kicks they're after. Shady lady and her lover operating undercover. She knows sin and virtue don't mix. Her mama raised her prim and proper, but now wild horses couldn't stop her when she's on a man hunt for kicks. For kicks, yeah, yeah, looking for kicks. Just kicks, nothing but kicks. I'm Satan's sinful servant sent to get you in a fix. So look me up just anytime. The name is Mr. Name is Mr. Name is Mr. Kicks.
Now, ladies and gentlemen, I promise to bring back Oscar Brown Jr. Here he is in the work song.
Breaking up big rocks on a chain gang. I'm breaking rocks and serving my time. I'm breaking rocks out, yeah, on the chain gang, 'cause I've been convicted of crime. Well, hold it steady right there while I hit it. I reckon that ought to get it. Been working and working, but I still got so terrible on the go.
The judge threw the book at me, and when I read his sentence there, I said, I ain't got time to do all that time. But that was cool.
Energy, that's what was swinging. Energy that they be bringing with each note they play in a serenade made to a jazz beat.
Hey, Daddy, what that there? Why that under there? And oh, Daddy, oh, hey, Daddy, look it over there. Hey, what they doing there? And why they going there? And Daddy, can I have that big elephant over there?
Signifying monkey, stay up in your tree. You always lie. Signifying, but you better not. No, you better not. You always lie. Signifying, but you better not. Monkey with.
Well, my name, of course, is Oscar Brown Jr. I'm a Chicagoan who grew up to become a writer and singer of the songs that I write, and to direct those, generally speaking, to a sort of cultural revolution and a social activism. Well, I was born in Chicago in 1926, just ahead of the Great Depression. My father and mother had met at Howard University, where my father worked his way through school waiting table and was on the debating team. He was very much a BMOC, big man on campus there. And my mother was, of course, a beauty, and that's why they got together. Their first date was to go to the Howard Theater, and their first kiss was coming back from that date, as I understand, which was fortunate for me. It was during World War I, of course, and my father left school to join the Army. Well, he and his brother, too. But my father went on to Des Moines, to Fort Des Moines, and trained to be an officer. And he went to France, and I think saw combat. He didn't get wounded or kill anybody that I know of. He and his brother Sidney had thought to settle at one point in Indianapolis, but then had elected to try Chicago. And when I was born, my father had just begun to practice law with his brother. They formed a firm called Brown, Cyrus, and Green. They had offices at 47th and South Parkway, which was right next door to the Regal Theater and the Savoy Ballroom, and across the street from the Metropolitan Theater and the Groove Record Store. It was like the hub of the universe. Growing up, it was cool. I lived in, of course, what is called Bronzeville. All the black folks in Chicago lived in Bronzeville. Everybody lived between 18th Street and 66, State Street and Cottage. But I grew up pretty much in that neighborhood until my dad got a job when I was about 12 years old. He got a job as the manager of Ida B. Wells Homes, which is the first public housing project, federally owned public housing project in Chicago. His slogan was more than shelter, a way of life. He felt that it was not sufficient to just put people in better bricks and mortar, that they needed to have a better way of life. He was a great daddy. I mean, coming up as a little kid, I remember both my parents being very loving people and strict, but very loving. And we had a lot of fun together. We'd go out to shows. We'd go to the Alpha House on Sunday. Sometimes we'd go downtown to the theater, to the movies, and come back on the L. I can remember that. And just about every Sunday we'd have ice cream. Everybody liked chocolate in my family, and chocolate ice cream was a big thing on Sunday evenings. I was supposed to be a lawyer. They had my desk there on 47th and South Park. You know, I would go, that's little Oscar's desk. But it just didn't take. I was raised to be in that environment, but I was also raised in the streets of Chicago. I was raised around the Regal Theater. I was raised in the alley with the cats, you know, and the girls that I was associated with, and with that culture. And I found myself writing songs at a certain point in life, and getting strokes for having done so, you know, being able to sing it at the parties. We used to call them jumps. I'd go to the jumpers, there was a little entertainment. The guys with the good voices got to sing, but I got to sing too, because I was a songwriter. And that was a part of my youth. I had spent the early part of it, of course, just playing in the park, and playing in the alleys, and listening to the Rag Man and the Watermelon Man, and the Chicago Defender, Newsboys, and the various sounds that later went into some of the songs that I'm most proud of.
Those days when the alleys behind our homes were places of great commerce and enterprise, along which all sorts of peddlers would come hawking their wares to the people who lived in the six flats, the kitchenettes, the tall buildings that lined the alley on either side. Most any afternoon in the summer of those days, we'd hear cries like, "Ice, ice, man, ice." This would announce the arrival of a big old burly character who'd be leading a tired old horse. The horse would be pulling a raggedy old canvas-covered wagon, and they'd come through there and bust up our ball game. But not without compensation, because we used to snitch chips of ice off the back of the wagon when the Iceman was upstairs making his deliveries, and they were the most refreshing things you ever tasted. Of course, now, if the chips we took were too big, the horse would leave his revenge in the middle of the alley. By the time the Iceman left, we'd have a new second base. Oh, shit. Then here would come maybe Deacon Holt, Pilgrim Baptist Church. Yes, ma'am, vegetable man, yellow yam, sweet potato. I got your freestone peaches, head 5 cents a pail. I got collard greens, stringless beans. Sad to say the jolly green giant froze Deacon Holt clean out of business. One cry, long gone was the cry of the old watermelon man. Watermelon man would come through. Hey, oh, hey, oh, get your watermelon, yeah. Watermelon man. Watermelon, I got your red ripe watermelon, yeah. Watermelon man. Watermelon
The first songs I started writing would be heartbroken songs. He's the one she cares for, the lucky one she loves. And here I am out on a limb. Oh, how I envy him. Well, now, first buddy I sang that to thought I had written it for him because he was in the same situation I was in. So that sort of let me know that songs have an impact.
So it was organic. It just happened naturally.
That's it. Yes, it did. I studied acting a little bit with Minnie Gallitzer, and she was a very fine teacher here. And I learned something about breathing, but just really the mechanics of the thing. As I said, people ask me, well, how did you get started and what drove you into it? I started writing songs and I started getting praise for that. And I wasn't getting praise for much else during those days. I was flunking out of school and I never could figure out what they were trying to teach me. I mean, it was boring. I've met Studs when I was in high school. I was 15 years old and I was going to Englewood High School. And my father, who was managing Ida B. Wells Homes, a big public housing development on the South Side, got word that they were auditioning for a youngster, and I took the audition and got the part. Studs was a regular on this program called Secret City, and I performed on it for, I guess, 6 weeks, and then they might have extended for a week or so, at $64.60 a week, which was considerably more than grown men were making for working 40 hours during those days.
Well, that was year 1939, 40, was it?
This was 1942.
42,
I was a junior in high school.
Oscar was about 15 years old.
Correct.
One of 3 boys, 2 white kids and this one black kid. And they had a little world of their own based on democratic principles. I was the mechanic, was their mentor. And it was written by a man named Jack Bentcover, who had been on the Writers Project of the WPA. And he wrote the script. It was basically a democratic idea.
Jesse Helms would have gotten it banned.
But the important aspect, just as Mahalia was the first person to appear on a television program as a non-domestic or non-subsidiary, Oscar was the first young African-American to ever appear as a non-comic relief, or whatever, as just one of three boys. Mm-hmm. That was again another first. So he's been in on a couple of firsts, you see.
Once jitney cabs that taxied us on Chicago's South Side competed with the city buses at a dime a ride. From 31st to 66th on what was South Parkway. That's who we used to travel with, and all we had to pay. A jitney driver was aware of customers and cops. He'd cut through traffic, what a scare, coming through sudden stops at intersections where he'd pause to pick up and discharge, and then, defying physics laws, tear up the boulevard. Cabs then were built to taxi 5, or so the law would state. But to the jitneys, that was jive. They'd pack in 6 or 8. The first 3 sat in the rear seat. 3 more took up 2 jumps. Up with the driver, 2 more squeezed, a total of 9 rumps. 9 Negroes of the working class, black salt of the earth, all jammed together ass to mass. We got our money's worth. A colored camaraderie quite often warmed that space, especially when you chance to see an old familiar face, or when some foxy stranger whom you never would have met seduced the air with her perfume. How fragrant it could get. At other times, a reeking drunk would blow the bending ear, exhaling alcoholic funk into the atmosphere. Passengers smoked and choked and joked along the jitney's route, quite often getting pushed and poked and trampled on to boot. A jitney driver drove his car the way his job drove him, working hours long and hard at risk of life and limb. Some dangers Jitney Jack might face a dozen times a day, because he always had to chase a dime to make it pay. Go speeding up to catch a light, come to a screeching halt, steering and veering left and right, competing to a fault. This competition ran for years and no one got a break. The competition grew more fierce with livelihoods at stake, until one day when Jitney Jack and a big bus collide, we learned for a fatal fact that was his last ride.
I practiced the arts. I was introduced to the arts through some wonderful people. One of them was Oscar Brown Jr.
Well, I've always thought of Oscar as one of those people who is a great contributor to the music, but is never really recognized because of the content of what he does, you know.
Oscar was socially aware, and he knew where he was. I'd never met anybody like him before.
Well, I've been very concerned about nomenclature, who we are and how we call ourselves. I read the Constitution of the United States and found that the slaves were not mentioned by any name whatsoever, not as Africans or niggers or nothing, that they just were not there.
Get 'em in, get 'em in. That sun is hot and plenty bright. Let's get down to business, get home tonight. Get 'em in, get 'em in. Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal, Ross, she's good for a start. Get 'em in, get 'em in. Now here's a real good buy, only about 15. Her great-grandmammy was a down homely queen. Just look at her face, she sure ain't homely. Like she in the Bible, she's black but comely. Get 'em in, get 'em in. I'm gonna start at 3. Can I hear 3? Step up, just take a good look, see, cause I know you want her once you see her. She's young and right, make a darn good breeder. Get 'em in, get 'em in. She's good in the field, she can sew and cook. Strip her down, Roy, let the gentleman look. She's full up front and ample behind. Examine her teeth if you got a mind. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. There's a bid of 3 from a man who's thrifty. 325, can I hear 350? Your money ain't earning you much in the banks. Turn around while I let them look at her flanks. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. 350's bidding looking for 4. $400 is the bargain show. 4 is the bid, 450. $500 not look alive. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. Don't mind them tears, that's one of her tricks. 550's the bid, now who say 6? She's healthy, strong, well-equipped. Make a fine lady's maid when she's properly whipped. Bid 'em in, get 'em in. 650, don't be slow. 7 is the bid, I'm gonna let her go. At 7, she's going, gone. Pull her down, Roy, bring the next one on. Get 'em in, get 'em in, get 'em in.
I think something should designate those whose ancestors were slaves here. Who are we? We were not African Americans in that condition. Frederick Douglass was not an African American when Cuffy the slave breaker was trying to whip him. Denmark Vesey was not an African American. Harriet Tubman was not an African American. Booker T. Washington could not have considered himself to be one, nor could have W.E.B. Du Bois. I never heard Martin Luther King or Malcolm X refer to themselves by such an incredible name. Who was the first African American? And by what means did that individual become an African American? In 1857, the Supreme Court handed down the Dred Scott decision, which declared that no African American, it said, could be a citizen. They wanted to define what slavery was, that slave property was the same as any other property, and that the Negro had no rights that a white man was bound to respect. Well, nothing ever rescinded that. There was no subsequent decision by the Supreme Court that invalidated that one. Nothing changed. There was no constitutional way for the United States government through the 14th Amendment to make the slaves citizens, because they weren't persons, and they weren't persons subject to the jurisdiction of the United States. And that's what the amendment reads: all persons born or naturalized in the United States and subject to the jurisdiction thereof. That didn't apply to my grandfather, Sterling Price Brown, who was born in Hinds County, Mississippi in 1860. He was not a person, he was a piece of property. So they said, you're free. But then they threw a net of citizenship over us that confined us to staying here in America with the very people who had enslaved us. For the purposes of apportioning taxes and determining representation in Congress, they were going to count the whole number of free persons, including those held to a term of service, that's the indentured servants, and excluding Indians not taxed, 3/5 of all other persons. Well, now here you have a document that speaks of free persons and other persons. And so the ones who are supposed to be free are not free because they are hooked to the slaves. A free man who is holding somebody else under the threat of death is not a free man. America is founded on a myth. The Constitution, with straight face, proclaims we people are divided by the fifth, although it never mentions any names, save to suggest some persons it calls free amount to 2/5 more than persons not, without explaining how it comes to be that 3/5 of a person gets begot. When the Constitution was first framed, the founding fathers, drunk with power amassed from a concoction that they never named, kept captives out of Africa outcast, called 3/5 of all other persons, chattel. Here, where the love of liberty was claimed, humanity was bought and sold like cattle, which must have made the framers so ashamed that, like a drunk pretending to be sober, the Constitution was deliberately contrived to cover up and so gloss over the damage it did human liberty, as if it might be mortified to death if it were found with bondage on its breath. In 47 years, a civil war inflamed by that peculiar institution the founding fathers managed to ignore when they were framing up the Constitution, all but destroyed the Union they created, for surely this republic would have died had the slaves not been emancipated and joined the conflict on the Union side. Joined up to help the blue defeat the gray. Joined up so right might triumph over wrong. Joined up to chuck their chattel chains away. Joined up almost 200,000 strong. Ironically, the Constitution saved by those 3/5 persons it had enslaved.
If he wasn't singing, he could be writing. If he wasn't writing, he could be acting. I mean, he's multi-talented. But because of his persona and his realism for black folks is what have kept him from being established, if you will.
But I don't think Oscar regrets a damn thing, you know, because those of us who know him, we idolize him because of what he did and the way he did it.
Oscar has a personality that transcends most people's perception of what's going on.
He's a literate, developed person, and that's very important. A lot of our artists today are not developed and not literate. Oscar reads. Oscar has read Marx. Oscar has read Adam Smith.
I had read Apteker, Herbert Apteker's Slave Revolt, History of Slave Revolts. Great revelation to me, lifted a great burden from me because I learned of Denmark Vesey and Nat Turner, and I learned of militant, violent resistances to slavery, and that just made me feel so much better because prior to that I had felt we had just taken it, that we were slavish by nature, but I hadn't felt like that in my heart. Now I realize that I wasn't alone, that there was a whole legacy of this resentment that I felt. Because I always wondered as a kid, how it would be to be in a country where you really could love the country, you know, and feel that the country was your country. Because I always had this feeling that I was, you know, in a hostile situation here.
If I am not mistaken, I once read back during that short spell I spent in school, where every slave set free was supposed to get for slaving 40 acres and a mule. Now, ain't no telling how much work was done by my ancestors under slavery's rule, but sure as hell the total got to run at least 40 acres and a mule. Now, I'm not saying this to see folks sweat, because I'm not bitter, neither am I cruel, but ain't nobody paid for slavery yet. About my 40 acres and my mule. We had a promise that was taken back, and when we hollered it was, hush, be cool. Well, me, I'm being rowdy, hot, and black. I want my 40 acres and my mule.
I see your name, your picture on the cover of Crisis.
Right, Du Bois magazine, don't forget.
I'm glad to see you finally made something of yourself, son.
Du Bois might like that.
Oh, he would love it.
Because he was editor of the, and don't forget, when you and I were younger, I was president of the Du Bois Theater Guild. Don't forget that.
And I was
didn't act,
one
you
of the
guys.
actors.
Oh, of course you were. You, Sid
director.
McCoy, and who was the big fella? You remember?
Art McCoo.
Art McCoo with that tremendous voice.
Yeah.
Who died? Janice Kingslow.
Yep.
What did we do? Waiting for
Wesley
Lefty?
Tilson, you did Waiting for Lefty. Studs Tucker was in Waiting for Lefty.
You know, I was trying to tell some young prospective journalists and writers about what we had that may have been lost. You remember when...
A lot of money.
When Hansberry, yeah. When Hansberry's plays came out, came out.
Yeah, Raisin.
Yeah, Raisin in the Sun. We went down to see that play collectively, you remember, and came back and discussed it.
Not I. I wasn't in that collective, because I was pleased.
No, I don't mean we tried to denigrate the play, but we went through what the ingredients of writing a play was about.
I remember when we first met.
Richard Durham's house, wasn't it?
Right. I was trying to find somebody to write Negro Newsfront.
That was an interesting thing. I think a lot of people don't recognize that that was an innovation that was superior to what was happening generally in the electronic media. We came on every morning for 15 minutes with a serious report on what was happening to black people all over this world. And then you did your own editorials.
Right. They used to censor me after a while.
Well, they finally put us on the air.
That's right. Well, we were denounced for being communists, for advocating things that are taken for granted today.
You know what I think about you, Oscar? I say, this man just has a rebellious nature, and he's going to be fighting against wrongdoing and injustice, even if he has to go out. If all the problems in the world were solved today, Oscar, you would be around with a microscope or a magnifying glass trying to find something wrong so you could attack it.
You know what happened when I was a teenager? Well, and even before that, on 2 occasions I did something that was cowardly. I failed to fight, failed to stand up, and the feeling that I got from that cowardice was so excruciating that I just never wanted to repeat that again.
So I had just always sort of considered myself a ne'er-do-well, you know. I was lamenting the fact that I hadn't done anything. I remember I saw a poem once. He slept beneath the moon and basked beneath the sun. He lived a life of going to do and die with nothing done. And that was the poem. I was plagued by that. But now all of a sudden I was interested in stuff, and I was attending meetings and I was making contributions. I mean, people were interested in what I had to say. I was thinking serious thoughts. I was no longer just chasing chicks and, you know, the general little bourgeois poker game that life was presenting. Oh, well, that was when I was a young political zealot. I was 19, 20 years old. I got turned down to the left-wing politics following World War II. They had thought everything was going to be hunky-dory when they came after the World War II. It was just mostly hunky. And I really got drugged by that, and I wound up joining the Communist Party. But that made me a real activist, really, and one of the ways I expressed my activism was to run for the state legislature when I was 22 years old on the ticket that was headed by Henry Wallace for president. And Earl B. Dickerson, who was a prominent businessman in Chicago, an attorney, was running for Congress, and I was running for the state legislature. Well, the whole progressive ticket got wiped out by the Democrats. Harry Truman sort of adapted the civil rights plank of the Progressive Party and just swept us away. But that was my first, the first time I voted for me.
Paul Robeson.
I dreamed I saw Joe Hill last night, alive as you and me. Says I, but Joe, you're 10 years dead. I never died, says he. I never died, says he.
The highlight of that whole effort in running for state legislature was that Paul Robeson came to a church on 56th and Indiana and made a speech on my behalf at a youth rally my campaign had organized there in the basement of this little church. And he came and made this dynamite speech illustrating the brotherhood of man in language and in music. He was a linguist as well as being a great musician. And so that was an outstanding meeting. I heard him speak a lot of times, but that one stands out. It was a great compliment.
Then a couple of years later, I entered the Republican primary for Congress. The purpose of that entry was to get issues into the campaign, knowing that the guy that the Republicans put up was going to be a weak candidate. He was a guy named Billy Goat Brown, Edgar G. Brown, who used to stand on the corners and sell civil rights for $1. I mean, something like that. He was a street politician, so they put him on the Republican ticket, and I knew that wasn't serious. And I was running against Dawson, William L. Dawson. Well, that wasn't serious either, because Dawson had a machine, and I had nothing. Later, I went to Dawson because I decided I wanted to run for Congress in the 2nd Congressional District. This time I was going to run straight up as a Democrat. But it was no point in thinking about doing that if you didn't talk to William L. Dawson, because he was the 1st District congressman, and he was the powerhouse in the black community, like it or not. So I made an appointment and went to Washington, D.C., and went to his office, you know. And so I said, Congressman Dawson, I'm thinking of running for Congress in the 2nd District, and I wondered what you thought were my chances. He said, what kind of organization do you have? So I changed the subject.
Bullshit should be odorless and tasteless, out of sight, anonymous, and faceless. Once it starts to smell, it gets hard to sell. Everyone can tell it's bullshit. bullshit. Can I get a witness? Bullshit, bullshit. Yeah, look here. Bullshit, also known by the initials BS, is employed by high officials, playing politics, pulling dirty tricks. Naturally they mix and bullshit, bullshit. Say it like you know it. Bullshit, bullshit. I'm talking about bullshit, bullshit that lies on your eyes like some wool knit to keep you so blind you stay in a bind, all confused in your mind by the bullshit. But that was the end of my political, running for office.
So what has it led you to this world of?
Well, I think it was Dad, my father. He was a race man. My first recollections of a race man being somebody who was for the black people, for Negroes. They didn't dare call anybody black, particularly if they were in those days. But he was for Negro people. That was his aspiration. And first recollection I have of him was as an advocate of a 49th state. There were 48 at the time. And he felt that rather than be a part of any of the states that we were in, particularly Mississippi, South Carolina, Georgia, that we should have our own state, hegemony, own economy. And they were calling him the governor.
This kind of militance, this kind of attitude was going on in my own mind when I was hired to play in Democracy USA and Destination Freedom and met Dick Durham.
Destination Freedom. The Chicago Defender and station WMAQ bring you Destination Freedom, a new radio series dramatizing the great democratic traditions of the Negro people, interwoven in the pageant of history and a part of America's own Destination Freedom.
And now Richard Durham enters the picture, the role he's played in both our lives. Richard Durham, the author of Destination Freedom, one of the most remarkable radio programs I've ever heard, and in which I participated along with Oscar a number of times. Richard Durham came out of the Writers' Project, but Dick played a tremendous role in both our lives.
I met Irene, and we got married at a time when our whole crowd was getting married. It was sort of in that fad thing. And we were in love enough, but as I found out, you shouldn't get married unless you know yourself, because when you say I love you, you ought to know one of them. If you don't know either, it really makes it flaky. And our relationship, got to be a blizzard of flakes after a while, and it just broke up. Unfortunately, we had 2 children before we broke up. And I was really shocked. I was, because having lived with my parents, I had never thought divorce was even a remote possibility in my life.
So I went to one of these weekend affairs, and Maxine happened to be there. And both of us were kind of on the rebound because she had left New York with her child and was breaking up her marriage, and mine was breaking up. And I was lamenting. I remember walking around. I was working the Packing House Workers Union at the time. I was walking around all gloomy, and one of the fine ladies over there at the Packing House, Emma Gates, said, "What's the matter with you?" I said, "Oh, man, my old lady, I lost my old lady." She said, "Well, get you another one, man."
Shortly thereafter, Maxine and I got married and began having first Iantha and then Bo and then Maggie. So I had 2 kids, David and Donna by Irene, and Maxine had the kid, Joan. And so we had 3 all at once.
In the 40s, when I was on the air, I used to be friendly with the packing house workers and other unions. I got a lot of news from them because they were always into something of significance to Negroes when I was doing Negro News Front. But then when I left that in about 1952, Dick Durham had gotten a job working for the International Office of the United Packing House Workers of America, CIO, and had formed what they call the program department with him as the coordinator of program for the International Union. So that's how I got involved, and it was a wonderful job. I say it was like getting a PhD in people because I learned the politics of the organization and I learned interpersonal relationships on a complex level, you know. And it just helped me to grow. It formed the basis for a whole lot of stuff that I then later wrote about and a lot of attitudes that I had as I wrote later in life.
In slaughterhouses where men butcher beef and swine and sheep come likewise to their grief, he labored with a well-honed blade. Whatever living there he made kept him and his from going on relief, or else turning thief. In bloody apron, boots, and overalls, he spent his day behind grim factory walls with little time to think or dream or anything but answer factory calls. Then, today, he falls.
Black liberation, civil rights, as it got kind of watered down to become, was a part of what we advocated. And so we were always trying to get integration into the plants, get upgraded jobs for black people. Our union was supposed to merge with the meat cutters union, AFL. And in the merged union, we wanted to be sure that there would be Negro representation in the hierarchy, in the top union jobs. And in order to do that, we had to eliminate some of the white people who were working for in the CIO union. So we set that all up. But when we went downtown to the Knickerbocker Hotel for the convention, the merger convention, they fell out. The merger was called off and we were right back to work for the guys we had just greased the skids for. So we were out. That was the end of our career at the packing house. They fired Dick, and Charlie Hayes came over to my house and said if I would dump Dick, I could stay. But I couldn't dump Dick, so I left. I went.
Shortly thereafter, I got drafted into the Army. I was 28 years old, which was a big drag. But that was something that I think the government just engineered to put me in so they could kick me out. They said I had associated with Paul Robeson and W.E.B. Du Bois and had been at peace rallies and at, civil rights meetings and all the stuff that I was proudest of having done, they accused me of doing. So they had kicked me out of the Army for it. My argument was, you knew I was a snake when you took me in. So, why can you now kick me out for being what you already knew I was? They asked me to be loyal to the United States, which is ridiculous, you can be intimidated and afraid of and coerced into, but loyalty you have to have is earned, so what did they do for me to be loyal about?
I remember one time I came up here and the FBI was standing there. A couple of agents accosted me as I came and wanted to talk to me, so I didn't want to bring them into the office. I brought them over across the street and sat right where that car is and talked to them. They wanted me they found out that I had quit the Communist Party or had been kicked out. There was always a dispute as to whether I got fired or I quit. But anyway, they wanted me to try and rejoin and spy, make regular reports for them. And so I said, well, they were telling me what a patriotic duty I'd be doing. I said, aside from that, what's in it for me? So they said, oh, Mr. Brown, the sky's the limit. He said, we can give you $100 a week. Well, this is back in like 1956, so $100 a week was a lot of money. But I told him I really wouldn't be able to shave myself and the morning, if I had to look in the mirror, knowing that I was joining the organization, people thought I was sincere and I was snitching. So I declined this opportunity. They said, well, if you can't help us, at least speak up for us sometime. I said, I'd be glad to do that if you all do something. I mean, catch some lynchers. I said, my father's in the real estate business. He can't even get big mortgages downtown. He can't join the Chicago Real Estate Board. He says, we didn't know that. I said, we knew the FBI. You're supposed to know that. That's why the trouble is. You know, that's why I'm dissatisfied. Right here.
In blue smoke and mirrors, the rainbow appeared with a big pot of gold at its end. So out toward that end of the rainbow we steered as we followed its beautiful bend. We crossed over bridges, high hills, and deep ditches. The rainbow's great riches our prize. Our search was in vain, though there was no damn rainbow, just blue smoke and mirrors and lies. Jesse L. Jackson Jr. How about that? His daddy. Oscar Brown Jr. Traitor to who? Who did I betray? I'm a traitor to whom? Is this the president? I didn't betray him. They say that if you do not support our president's decisions, you are a traitor. Well, guilty as charged. I certainly don't support his decisions. But then he's got a lot of he got a country full of traitors, if that's the definition. Barbra Streisand, Oliver Stone, Julia Roberts, wow. Sean Penn, my goodness, Albert Gore Jr. What did they mad at him for, running for president? I mean, obviously he was opposed to the president.
Summer in the city sure is sweet. Listen to that syncopated city beat. Listen to that soft guitar somewhere, blowing blue and easy on the warm summer air. Summer in the city, sidewalks hot, all the lovers looking for a nice cool spot. City people, city sights, busy streets on sultry nights. It's all so wonderful, strange and pretty. You and love and the sprawling city.
There's a loft upstairs. That's where I used to do my writing. Had my little desk in my office. I was supposed to be selling real estate and managing real property, but I never did get into that too tough. I was really busy writing, trying to break into show business, working on Kicks and Company, using up reams and reams of paper.
It's all worthwhile, though, isn't it?
Oh, yeah. That was what my life became all about.
I wanted to write plays. I had written a play, and while I was in the Army, and
I had wanted to continue writing songs, and then I had to come across the bright idea of combining this and writing a musicals, which would let me be a playwright and a songwriter all at the same time. There wasn't that much black literature at that time. There was no Amen Corner. There was no nothing from which to draw a story and create a musical, so I had to come up with my own. That's how Kicks and Company was born.
Mr. Kicks was the devil's emissary. He tried to get everybody to go to hell by just devoting their lives to kicks. And he found himself on the campus of a Negro university in the South trying to corrupt the leaders of this sitting movement because he was afraid that if this spirit of love were to jump the color line, that it could become a national fad and it would be bad for his business. And he picked on a youngster named Ernest Black, who was at the crossroads in life.
I knew the Hansberry family, Lorraine Hansberry, who was the author of Raisin the Sun. I showed her my plays, which she didn't care for too tough, but she was quite impressed with the songs. And her husband, Bob Nemiroff, was also a songwriter and had had a big hit called Cindy Oh Cindy. Bob was the one who then took the songs to New York, sent me money to go into a studio, and I went in there with Floyd Morris.
Floyd was playing in a club on the south side of Chicago, and I used to come in with new tunes clutched in my hot little hand. He'd look them over sympathetically and play them through, and sometimes he'd call me up to the stand and let me sing a couple for kicks.
We made demonstration records, and he took them around to various record companies. Bob did. And one of the companies was Columbia, and Al Ham heard it. So Al sent me a contract, and that was exciting, the fact that I was getting offered a contract by Columbia Records. But when I read the contract, I wrote him back that this read like a clever circumvention of the 13th Amendment, and that I wasn't all that interested in being a singer anyway, and I wanted to know what are they going to do for me as a writer, and I just had in my naivete, I just, blessed them out. Finally, Al called me and said, why don't you go on and sign the contract? That's just our standard contract. And if you get a hit, hey, they'll write a new contract for you. And so I did. Finally, it was the best game in town. I'd been trying for a year with no success. When I came to New York to record what was to be an album called Sin and Soul, I brought with me the script that I had been working on for about a year that was going to be a musical. And I sang this to Nemiroff and to Lugoff, and they liked it. They signed me to a minimum basic production contract to produce Kicks and Company. And they gave me $800 a month for 4 months while I went around doing backers auditions to raise the money to do Kicks and Company. As it happened, there was a big purge at Columbia Records, and so Al was available to become my manager, and I asked him to do so, and he did, and he went then to Max Gordon, who owned the Village Vanguard and the Blue Angel in New York, and I went over and auditioned, got the gig, and got offered more money than I'd ever made. Hired Floyd and brought the trio, and we opened at the Vanguard. We were quite a sensation. I had gotten a lot of fine endorsements on the cover of Sin and Soul when that record came out on Columbia. Dorothy Kilgallen and Steve Allen, Max Roach, Lorraine Hansberry, and Nina Simone, fine endorsements on this thing. So there was considerable excitement, and that led to my appearance on the Today Show. Dave Garroway was so impressed on that spot that he came with his daughter the next night or so to see me at the Vanguard. And because I had done Brown Baby and Dat Dare and Rags and Old Iron, that was one of my sets at the Vanguard. The other set included the songs from the show. So I sang that set, and he was really impressed, so much so that right there in the Vanguard, he said, we'll turn over the whole Today program to help you raise this money to bring this show to Broadway.
The first time that Oscar Brown Jr. was on the Today Show a couple months ago, you may recall that his effect was very strong on us. It was very easy to say this is a great natural man, and the fact that things are happening for him in the most electric way is really not surprising, nor was it hard to predict. Life magazine is here this morning, Newsweek. People are covering this audition we're having of the new musical that Oscar Brown Jr. wrote, and the lyrics and the songs and the acting and the setting and the dances, everything.
That was his backers audition, and people were very excited about it. Why? This magical person, as we now know, his capability of performing, sold that show.
I remember Burgess Meredith being in the studio that day, and that was the first time I saw him. He later was to become Mr. Kicks. We had continued, though, to do backers auditions, and the backers auditions had grown to be some events. At first, they were in the homes of wealthy people, but now we went to the Johns Hopkins Club, which allowed us to seat 150, 200 people. And I remember Mrs. Eleanor Roosevelt came to that. Oh, she was also endorsed the show. She came to that backers audition, and Harry Belafonte attended one. He sort of sat over there scowling, and Shelley Winters was at one. And I remember John Hendricks, the singer and composer, ran up to me. He said, "You're blessed, you're blessed. John Coltrane's in the audience." I didn't know who the hell John Coltrane was, although I sort of heard the name, you know. But I remember that Coltrane was in that audience at that backers audition in Chicago. And we had the money. We had the $500,000. We were over the top. We were going to go into production. And life was completely changing. I was now making money.
I had just returned from Hawaii, and Major rang me up and said, "Nichelle, there's this company in from New York, and they're reading and auditioning, seeing people for a musical, a big musical. It's an Oscar Brown Jr. musical, Kicks and Company." I hadn't heard of Kicks and Company, but I knew Oscar Brown Jr. And I performed for them. I read, I sang, I danced. And Oscar Brown Jr. walked up on the stage, and he looked at me with that devilish, impish, cocky grin, and he said, "Hi, Hazel."
Hazel's hips are a concert of contours and curves as she slips to and fro round the table she serves. I buy 6 meals a day in this crummy cafe, 'cause I see Hazel that way. Hazel's eyes are divine and her hair is so fine, but her hips bring the tips. I fell in love with Nichelle, so she started treating me mean, so I took her to dinner. I said, "You know, you're like 2 people. See, one of them is very sweet and tender, and the other one is really hard and cold. I prefer the other, the first one." She said, "I killed that bitch."
There was only one thing wrong, and Burgess Meredith is the person who pointed it out. He said, "I should not be playing Mr. Kicks." He said, "Let me direct it, and or be involved in it in somehow. I'll do that. But Oscar Brown Jr. should be playing Mr. Kicks."
But then I was the writer, and I could see that, as I say, musicals are rewritten. They're not written. There's going to be problems. Things are not going to work. Everything that you just put on the page and when you're sitting up there in the real estate office is not going to work that way once you stand it up with live people. And once you're dealing with choreographers and a director and a musical director, everybody's going to have contributions. You got other creative egos that are coming into this thing. And I didn't want my little neophyte ego to get lost in this shuffle. And I figured if I was playing Mr. Kicks, then they would be able to bring in somebody to help me. And I didn't want that help.
I personally think that had Oscar performed it, you know, taken on that role, which he was so magnificent at, it would probably still be running today.
Permit me to introduce myself. The name is Mr. Kicks. I dwell in a dark dominion away down by the river Styx. The devil has sent me here because I'm full of wicked tricks, and I'm such a popular fellow among all you lunatics.
They wanted to open in Chicago at McCormick Place because Chicago was my home. That was disastrous because McCormick Place wasn't finished. The acoustics were horrible, so the words were garbled. A great deal of money was spent trying to adjust that. Experts were brought in. Then, meanwhile, the stage wasn't finished. There was no wood floor, so the union wouldn't allow them to dance on that concrete. They had to rent a field house several blocks away from the theater for the dance rehearsals. And all of this is spending up the money so that before the show opened, they had run out of money, and they being the producers.
Kicks is always in demand, cause Kicks is full of fun and laughter. Lots of folks get out of hand.
Lorraine, now she immediately came in and cut my second song. Man, Ernest, boy, you into something now. I thought I was pretty solid. In the first rehearsal we had with Madame, she cut that thing. And then she saw me sitting in a corner and she said, you know, you have eyes just like my brother. He wanted to kill me too. Her title was director, but she had some woman from Northwestern who was her assistant. This woman was to restage it, and Lorraine was to tell us why. Something like that. I couldn't figure it out.
When Kicks and Company closed, everybody walked away. Nobody then put it as a part of their credits that they were involved with Kicks and Company. It was pretty much the only person involved, and that was me. People could say, well, you know, you failed. Hey, look, man, I'm a young Negro from Chicago, Illinois, who got $400,000 to produce a show on Broadway, and the thing didn't fail because of any fault of mine. So I just took the attitude, you know, this would be a good lesson to me. Failure, you more or less have to accept. Success can be thrust upon you, you know. I remember lying on the floor of the theater, crying, and a light from the theater reflected in a chair, and it's bing, like a light going off in my head. And I don't know, it seemed to suggest things were gonna be all right somehow. I was thinking I got fired from the Army. I got fired from the Communist Party. One of the quickest firings was from the DuSable Museum of African American History, 90 days. I tried to run for election. I always lost the election. So I think there's a lot to be learned from rejection.
Me, I've always lived by this golden rule. Whatever happens, don't blow your cool. You got to have nerves of steel. Never show folks what you honestly feel. I live my whole life this way. For example, take yesterday. I breezed home happy, bringing her my pay. Her note read, so long sappy, I have ran away. I threw myself down across our empty bed, and this is what I said.
I have been going around to jazz clubs asking various musicians if I could write something to, write lyrics to something that they had composed, or I would ask singers as I asked Abbey.
By the time I met Oscar, I had a blooming career, you know. I was a cover girl for Ebony, and I had made The Girl Can't Help It.
Well, I first met Abbey through Ann Henry. Ann Henry was a classmate of mine at Inglewood High School. And I said, I know some, marvelous people, and I know you're trying to get started in show business, so I want to take you to meet Abbey Lincoln and Maya Angelou. And so she did. Abbey was playing at the Black Orchid, and Maya was over at a club called Mr. Kelly's.
I was singing, Happiness is Just a Thing Called Joe, and My Man. He beats me too, what shall I do? Leave. They're all, it was a drag, and I figured it out.
I told Maya that I was a writer. I had songs, and so she was gracious enough to invite me to come to her hotel room the next day to sing some of these. And as I was singing them, she said, whoa, wait. She said, I can't be this selfish, because she was very impressed. And she called Abbey, and she said, come, you gotta hear this. So Abbey came down, and I was singing them again.
He said to me, well, what kind of a song would you like to sing? I said, write a song about a beautiful man, a strong man, like the men I know.
I'm in love with a strong man, and he tells me he's wild about me. I'm in love with a man who is everything grand. Any man can be.
We went over to the recording studio where they did Strong Man and Sonny Rollins and Paul Chambers and Wynton Kelly and Kenny Dorham. I mean, giants of jazz. And they were singing my song, Hot Dog. I was really in now.
Driver man, he made a life, but the mammy ain't his wife. Chopping cotton, don't be slow. Better finish out your row.
Max and I became involved in a project that was going to be called The Beat. It was an anthology, a musical anthology of black life from Africa all the way up to the present, around the drum. And it was going to be composed for a jazz quartet and an octet of voices. We composed a great number of songs until we had a falling out, a political falling out. I wanted to end it on a note that was more Martin Luther King, and Max wanted to end it on a note that was more Malcolm X. And we had quite a bitter falling out about it. It was not a mild thing. And that stopped that project altogether. The songs that we had been working on for The Beat were released on a record called Freedom Now Suite, We Insist. And it featured Max and Abbey and Max's group.
That was the real debut of Max as a composer, in a sense, composer and, writing those songs. I mean, he really comes out strong. And I think Oscar was on the set to really, bolster that and strengthen it and expand it.
About 20, 30, I don't know how many years later, I was listening to the radio one time over at Ted Ross's house, The Cowardly Lion and the Wiz. So I'm listening to the radio, here comes, I say, hey, that's my song. That's from Freedom Now Suite, and the announcer comes on and said Max had signed a contract with Columbia Records. They were going to re-release the Freedom Now Suite, put some promotion behind it, and that they were going to do some other projects. So I got in touch with Max and said, hey, man, I just heard the good news. What do we, what did you get? He says, what's that got to do with you? I said, well, I wrote the lyrics to, you know, several of those songs. He said, well, Coleman Hawkins played the tenor saxophone too, but he ain't getting any more money. So, you know, if you think you're gonna get any more money, you better call my lawyer. So I said, well, hell no, I don't want to get in a public dispute with Max Roach about the Freedom Now suite, you know, because that would really be a pain in the ass to everything that we were both trying to stand for.
Drive a man and quit in time.
I never seen any man perform the way I saw you perform. When I saw you on TV, you were on the Ed Sullivan Show, you're doing the work song. I thought that was so hot.
Yes.
Wait a minute now. You're supposed to say, thank you. Oh. We were working with Red Fox, and he had his 25th year anniversary in show business. And Red Fox was a dirty old man, but he was very sweet, though. I'd go in the dressing room, we'd have his arm around one girl. There would be like 3 or 4 of them all together, just all tangled up. I just ignored him, go to fix my little hair. Okay, see you on stage. So one night he came to me, he said, Miss Pace, ma'am, where would you please? I said, of course, Mr. Fox. He said, I'm having my 25th year anniversary party. Would you please come? I said, sure, I'd love to. Can I be my girlfriend? He said, yeah, it's okay, cool. So I go to the Red Fox's party, knock on the door, open the door, and who's standing here but the man I saw on TV? So I walk in, he says, Hazel. My name's not Hazel, my name is Jean Pace, go give me a drink.
So one thing led to another, and I was in love with her. I just fell in love with her.
What you want me to do?
She was talented. She could sing. She was a dancer.
Yes, it's true. You're my man. Take my hand. I'm with you.
So bit by bit, she began singing with me. So we started going together, and the tighter we got, we needed someplace to stay because I was coming out to California quite frequently during those days doing a show called Jazz Scene USA.
I'm Oscar Brown Jr., and tonight I'm wearing 3 hats. One, in my usual role as your host on the Jazz Scene USA. One as a composer of lyrics set to jazz compositions. This is my thinking cap. And a 3rd hat as a writer of the songs or rather the singer of the songs I write.
And of course, this produced an extreme strain on my marriage to Maxine. I had to make a decision. I had tried to avoid that because really I felt I should have had 2 wives because I needed somebody with the family, the kids at home. But to be out on the road, you really needed something, or you get prey either to loneliness or to some situations that you don't want to be involved with.
Mom was very hurt, and I remember she told me she tried to go along with it for a while, and for years, you know. And she even had a baby when she knew about it. Maggie was born, and Jean and Dad had already had their relationship going.
It troubled her what happened with the relationship, the way things turned out. She with her 4 children and no man in the house, you know, and basically went with somebody else. And it was pretty in your face, kind of hard. And there was a lot of sadness and pain. I definitely remember that.
Because, you know, I wasn't everybody's love child. There was a lot of animosity going on there, you know. And I'm so blessed to just be able to still be with my sisters, you know, and my brothers, even though all of that, you know, confusion that I didn't know about when I was a little girl, but it was there, you know.
Mom had this disease that we didn't even know she had. By the time we knew something was wrong, 2 weeks later she was dead. She had a rare cancer, bone marrow cancer. And she said when she was in the hospital, she hardly could talk or anything, you know. She had a tube in her mouth or something for a respirator and kidney thing hooked up to that. So during that 2 weeks, you know, she would say, I want to see my husband. Because she always considered Dad her husband. She never gave him a divorce, so he was her husband technically. And he came to see her. He was in town that time doing a show with Jean, and they were staying downtown in a hotel. So he would come over, you know, and see her.
When you asked me if I knew her, and I said I did, I lied. Surely I'd have spoken truer had I said instead, I tried. She was introduced as Mama, Daddy's dear devoted spouse, as I bowed into this drama in which they were playing house. I, of course, was Mama's baby and the apple of her eye. All I needed, Mama gave me. All I had to do was cry. It was Mama who was woman first, then aunts and grandmas too. Over half this race called human. Every sister that I knew, and the little friends and neighbors with the ribbons and the curls who bestowed those special favors that can only come from girls. She awoke my primal urging and provoked it into lust that sent all the juices surging through my system with great thrust. She became life's main attraction as she put on me a hitch, born of biologic action, centered deep within our sex. I've been bested by her brilliance, by her talent, by her tact. She's shown strength and great resilience, often courage that I lacked. Oh, but if she's done me dirty, sure I've dealt her much the same. Been unfaithful, false, and flirty, hard to hold and tough to tame. When she reappeared as mother, the receiver of my seed, we were loving one another to fulfill our common need, both a party to the sharing of the suffering and fun, and the beauty of her bearing me a daughter and a son. And she came again as daughter, Daddy's darling angel child, full of charms her nature taught her by which I could be beguiled. Wrapped around her little finger, woman often has inspired me to do my best to bring her anything her heart desired, because images projected of a man who's strong and wise mean their most when they're reflected in the mirror of her eyes, and confirmed by her devotions to be crowned by her caress makes the most of my emotions, though I readily confess when you asked me if I knew her and I said I did, I lied. Surely I'd have spoken truer had I said instead, I tried.
A long time ago, I made a choice. I said, you can either operate for money or for people.
The older I grow, the older I grow. With every tick of the clock, while I wait for Mr. Opportunity to.
Awesome. Philip Weaver.
Bill, glad to see you.
It's good to see you too, man.
Bro.
I just was thinking about when I saw you coming by, I said, man, this guy, I wonder if he remembers Opportunity Please Not.
I could never forget that. You don't go to work with the Blackstone Rangers and forget it.
In 1966, where he was more or less at the peak as far as notoriety, he had focused in terms of career versus mission, things that he might be able to do. And that developed in terms of his working relationship with a gang, a street gang called the Blackstone Rangers. And at the time he did that, I thought he was crazy because it was a situation where why would you want to go from doing what you're doing and having success at it to working with the street gang that was literally terrorizing the high school that I had attended.
They were gangbanging in the community, and they were notorious, and they were all in the papers, and everybody was scared of it. It was hard to get investment to do anything on the South Side. And so I went to the Stones. Muhammad Ali had come to your all's meeting one,
sure did.
And then next week I thought I could bust in there, but I didn't. I wasn't a boxer, and they weren't listening to no poets. So it was months later before I got a chance to talk to a delegation of them
who Chuck LaPaglia brought over to my father's real estate office. And in our conversation led to my suggestion that we were going to do a show for the gang to give them something else to do, put them in another enterprise, so to speak. And they said, well, can we be in the show? And they overwhelmed us with talent. So the idea of doing a show for them was replaced by the idea of doing a show with them. Paul, Crazy Paul. Paul starts. They call him Crazy Paul. Crazy Paul starts off saying, well, Oscar Brown Jr. is trying to go south with the Blackstone Rangers money. Woo! And now you know I don't want to hear that. All these cats out here. So I said, well, I hope you keep that going because I'm gonna get the mafia next. And I want the reputation. I said, if you just think about it, you are the last niggas in the world I would rob. So Gene and I walked out, and we took the band with us. Well, I was trying to stop the show because they had taken it off track, and I wanted to get it back on track. So in order to do that, I took the band to New York with me. Hey, bro, the night I was about to leave, Bull, Angel, Johnny Little, and Bop came up to my house to destroy me. They were so mad. However, the politics of the gang was such that the only thing that could get those four guys together in the same car was anger. And Jean, I wasn't home, Jean held them off. She said, look at you. How can you come up here with that expression on your face about him? And she turned them suckers away. And they could never get it together enough to come back. You know, I just was so depressed after that experience for a while because I saw where there's no will, there's no way. Right. There's no real problem with talking to boys, for a man to talk to boys. They had a bad reputation. But when you got in there and started talking to them, it's just boys. They need to see a man around. Right, right. I tell you, I took precaution though. I grew a beard so I wouldn't be mistaken for a boy because they were shooting at boys. they were shooting at each other. So that's when I first grew a beard. I was about 40 years old. It was you talk about, did I forget it? I could never forget that. That was one of the things that shaped my life because it turned me on to the rich talent of my people. These little kids, everybody's just saying, you know, throwing them, these little dirty rats. Right. Hey, man, I felt like the Pied Piper, man. I brought them, these are not rats, these are your children. That's right. And they're beautiful.
In 1957, a street gang was formed by a group of young boys living in and around Blackstone Avenue in Chicago. The Chicago Police Department named them the Blackstone Raiders, and they in turn renamed themselves the Blackstone Rangers. I'm sure you're going to enjoy what they do. Ladies and gentlemen, meet the Blackstone Rangers.
And then I go downtown. Oh, people keep telling me, oh, don't hang around. It's been a long time coming, but I know change don't come. Oh, yes it is. Yes it will. Yeah. That's the way they used to do it. Standing on the corner in the hood.
You need to have myths. You need to have people who go outside the thing. You have to have some bad niggas, some niggas that just don't give a shit about caving. And that's what I wanted to be, that kind of guy. I always liked the guys who did that. I mean, you know, people like Jesus and Martin Luther King, Mahatma Gandhi, the stand-up dudes. I always wanted to be with the stand-up dudes.
Oscar, first and foremost, speaks to black people worldwide, to African people. His message is to us, and of course, since it's a profound message, it's also universal.
In the early 60s, there was a great emphasis, particularly among jazz musicians, to reach into the roots of black culture for
compositions like This Here and That There and Moaning and a whole bunch of stuff that was, Bobby Bryant, who was a friend of mine, did a song called Sleepy and Sanctifism. And so we were trying to draw from our roots during that period of time. And I was not only looking to the music, but I was looking to the literature as well. And Gwendolyn Brooks' poem of DeWitt Williams on his way to Lincoln Cemetery struck me. And I put a blues to that and took it out to her house and sang it to her, and she approved it, and we recorded it. And this was in about 1961.
He was born in Alabama. He was bred in Illinois. He was nothing but a plain black boy. Swing low, sweet, sweet chariot. Nothing but a plain black boy. Drive him past the pool hall, drive him past the show. Blind within his casket, but maybe he'll know. Down through 47th Street and underneath the L, and the northwest corner prairie that he loves so well. Swing low, sweet, sweet chariot. Nothing but a plain black boy.
The record company, which was Columbia, was so pleased with the record that they made a single of it and issued it as a single. The single had to be withdrawn from the market because the NAACP objected to the use of the word black. It was a pejorative as far as the NAACP was concerned. And the record company yielded to that and withdrew the record from the market. Whereupon Gwendolyn Brooks wrote them a letter, the most eloquent letter, very brief in the prose, that led up to her just simply quoting the poem. And it was so beautiful, it made them look so foolish.
Swing low, sweet, sweet chariot. Nothing but a plain black boy. Right now, a sample of my wares, a jazz composition by a brilliant young Philadelphian composer, pianist, Bobby Timmons, with some words by an even younger Chicagoan, my 6-year-old son, Bobo.
Hey, Daddy, what that there? Why that under there? And oh, Daddy, oh, hey, Daddy, look it over there. Hey, what they doing there? And why they going there? And Daddy, can I have that big elephant over there?
Don't wanna comb my hair, wear my teddy bear. And oh, Daddy, oh, hey, look at the cowboy coming there. Hey, can I have a pair of boots like that to wear? And Daddy, can I have that big elephant over there?
Well, the time did march. Years did go. Little fella got his chance to grow. Never got that elephant, though. That fantasy we traded in on a big bass fiddle played by my used-to-be quizzical kid, Oscar Brown III. Bobo. Perfecto.
Yeah, and then, man, the first time I did that, I mean, with you at the bakery, man, it's like this happy, this cute song, and then you like waste people, like right at the end of it, you talk about, well, you know, Oscar Brown Jr. died in a...
Yeah, well, just don't remind me.
Yeah, I know. It's like, wow.
Yeah.
That really messed me up.
Worst thing ever happened in my life.
It was about 3:14 in the morning, and a call came in and said that there'd been a terrible accident. And my whole family converged on the hospital. Maggie and Africa and Napoleon and Iantha and Joan. We were all there. Everybody who was in town was there. And that's how that happened.
And he was killed by a drunk driver?
Yeah, a drunk driver swerved all the way across a grassy median strip on the outer drive. Somebody had already phoned on him because he was weaving all over the street, all over the outer drive. And he crossed over to where Bo was coming down the street and hit him head on, killed them both.
So they took us in the room, they let us see him laying stretched out on the bed, you know, and it just looked like a warrior that had fallen. You know, he was majestic.
Sometimes it's still pretty hard to believe.
I really don't even understand why. You know, I can talk about it today, and it's hard to even understand why it makes me cry so much. It was so sad, you know, just the way he got snatched, you know, no goodbyes, just so violently. That was really sad.
Dropped a feather to the ground. Before it landed, it blew around. Directions changed by the wind. I tried to catch it in my hand again.
Oscar used to keep a big tub of weed, a wash tub. It was about maybe like this, whatever that is, and maybe this high. And generally it would be half full. I don't know how he carried this around. I never thought about that. I said, how does Oscar carry this kind of weed around, you know? Because he didn't sell weed. It wasn't his job, you know what I'm saying? But he would, generally Oscar would have that tub and not much weed would be in it. And we would roll dope from the tub.
Yeah. Yeah, yeah, we got it right there. We're smoking marijuana like we just don't care. We got it right there. So blaze up the chalice with the ganja you hear. We got it right there. We're smoking marijuana and we just don't care. We got it right there.
You think the authorities will recognize the smoke? Oh, man. There's a guy named Harry Jacob Anslinger who conducted a decades-long program against marijuana.
Really?
He was responsible for getting it outlawed.
Really?
Mayor LaGuardia of New York had a study conducted, and the study said there's nothing wrong with smoking marijuana. Anslinger squashed that.
Wow.
And kept on going. I wonder where he is now, the dirty dog.
I talked to a psychiatrist one time. This guy is an expert on drugs. He was asking me, did I use any drugs? I said, marijuana. He said, well, how much have you smoked? I said, about a farm. So he said, you ought to stop. I said, why? Why shouldn't I be able to smoke marijuana? They haven't demonstrated anything wrong with it, and I can demonstrate a lot of things good with it. I've written poems, I've done performances, I've gotten reviews from people who admired what I did. Well, marijuana enhanced it. It didn't enable it, but it certainly enhanced it the way oil does a ball bearing. It makes it smoother. It makes me want to write, want to do something creative.
You know, I still love Oscar's work a great deal, and I still am as frustrated, I won't say as frustrated as he, but feel very frustrated for brothers like that and sisters like that who can't get their work, who really can't get the work the way it needs to be. You know what I mean? You know, like Oscar's work for black people would be as common as, what's the dude's name, Neil Simon on Broadway. You understand what I'm saying? Oscar would be our Neil Simon. Every 2 years he would have another show out, which we would love and we would go and dig it.
Several of the plays are essentially musical reviews, but I've tried to order them dramatically so that they have a beginning and a middle and an end, a sort of dramatic structure. And I call them dramatic organizations of musical expressions. Great Nitty Gritty essentially is that. Great Nitty Gritty started as an idea that began when Jane Byrne, who was the mayor of Chicago, moved into Cabrini Green, one of the big public housing developments. They'd had several gang shootings there, and she wanted to dramatize her opposition to that by moving into the community herself.
Slave Song is something that I worked on quite a number of years with Alonzo Levister. Lonnie Levister, a New York composer who was the arranger for Kicks and Company. That's how we met.
Auctioning slaves is a real high art. Bring that young gal, Roy. She's good for a start. Bed them in, get them in.
Big time Bug White. The play was about this group of guys got together to get money from the government, and instead of doing right with it, they was partying and shit.
Oh, so we did it in San Francisco, and then it was taken to Broadway, and we got Muhammad Ali to play Big Time Buck White, and that was a magnificent show. It was funny. When we did it in New York, all the black people were falling out laughing, white people sitting like this. It was a black thing.
And Ali was fun. I love him today. Ali has no idea who Charles Weldon is, but he remembers Rubber Band. You know, so whenever I see Ali, even in his state, he goes, Rubber Band.
After the show closed, Miles Davis, who was there opening night, looking good with the finest chick you were gonna see, and a long snakeskin ankle-length coat, man. Miles was playing the Village Gate and had the whole cast, except for Muhammad Ali, come up there and perform for a whole month as the opening act, paid him union scale, and kept the show alive in New York for that much longer, which I thought was really a hip thing for Miles Davis to do.
The Lone Ranger cried tonto. Stick with me and I'll double your pay. We can do a switch about. You give me your pony Scout and ride Silver high ho ho way. But hurry up, said the masked man. To get away, we're gonna have to race. Tonto took Silver and laughed and said, what you mean, weak pale face?
That's enough. My absence from the record scene was, I guess, mutual. They weren't looking for me, and I certainly wasn't looking for them because I had just been disappointed in the whole thing. I think music is in the hands of business people who don't like music and don't particularly care for musicians. They don't want to pay them, they'll cheat them. They're not trying to put anything back into the development of music in the schools or any level that I know of in particular. They're really interested in selling records, and they don't particularly care what's on the records.
As this grave topic one approaches, the care and feeding of cockroaches, by this fact one is quickly struck seeing roaches run amok. Call it destiny or luck. Roaches sure do love to fuck. There's no creature in existence multiplies with such persistence. That's what's getting me all irate. Roaches' nerves too fucking great. They get hungry, will they wait? Hell no, they'll invade your plate. From me, roaches get no quarter. They survive fire, wind, and water. Oldest critters on this planet act as if they always ran it. Take your goddamn bed for granted. Some say cool, but I can't stand it. No roaches. No more saying buenos noches to a house full of cockroaches. Knowing all up in your wall, they be fucking on the crawl, having them a buggy ball. No, I'm one and one and all. If I see you, bam, I got you. Adios la cucaracha. Not cause I find killing fun, but one of two things must be done. Off them or get overrun. So I'm saying nada, none, no roaches. La cucaracha. I got you.
Peace out whenever y'all ready. Ready? Action!
The definitive thing about black music is it don't mean a thing if it ain't got that swing. Edward Kennedy Ellington. Where I went to the library and I looked up swing in the physics book, and I was amazed to find out that the name for swing there was harmonic motion. I said, wow, that's really nice. You know, as a musician, I can really dig that. So I read on, and I found out that harmonic motion is the motion of a pendulum, and that it is an energetic function that moves energy from one place to another with such efficiency that energy, all forms of energy, moves in this harmonic motion. African people, because they had danced and sung and swung to the drum for millennia, religiously, for social reasons, for economic reasons, for all kinds of reasons, that they had become as drum-burned as they were sunburned. And that this accounted for the fact that young black kids could do something like jump double dutch, which I considered a highly rhythmic activity. What was it? What is there in the mechanism of young black kids, of Africa's offspring, that gives them this double dutch quality, this ability to jump and onto temporal stimulus with this kind of exquisite balance? So finally I asked the friend who gave me the clue that I needed. She said, well, when she was jumping double dutch as a kid, they had to jump in. I said, what do you mean? She said, well, you had to find the space between the ropes in which you can jump. So I said, so then this means that one kid jumping one rope is in one circumference. They just have to deal with space-time that is defined by that one rope. If they go into two ropes, they are jumping into a space-time that is the property of neither one nor the other, but only the combined property of the two. You drop one rope and that dimension disappears. You add the rope and it automatically is there.
You're tired? Do one more?
I was thinking this morning, getting old is like moving into a bad neighborhood. You got all kinds of tough people living in there. Neighbors insult you, hurt your feelings, tell you you're wrinkled, your hair gets gray, the pain starts to come at you, you know, you get mugged as you walk down the street. This is the neighborhood now. This is the hood from now on, and it doesn't get much better. In fact, you go deeper into it, the harder it is on you, until finally you move out altogether, and then I guess that relieves that problem anyway.
You don't get famous till you die, right? So be it.
That should not happen. We should have the opportunity to walk up and hug Oscar Brown Jr. and kiss him while he's still alive and well and doing things.
Oscar Brown Jr. is a genius.
Brown baby, when you grow up, I want you to drink from the plenty cup.
Breaking great big rocks on the chain gang.
Fidelity in Oriente, cuando underlay fidelity. Remember that?
God damn.
That's his song. He never finished that song.
Yes, I did.
You did?
Finally.
Sin and Soul, Oscar Brown, Jr. May I quote? My song started when I was a kid, flipping rides on the wagons that pedal down our alley, hiding and seeking and learning there is more than one world. Boy, most people haven't found that out yet. Most of my world's a Negro. Being Negro is not always pleasant, but it's vigorous exercise for the soul. It can enrich an artist. The melodies I make grow out of tunes, rhythms, chants, calls, cries that have always been sung to me. My lyrics are verses about feelings I've felt and scenes I've dug. My aim is to deliver messages that swing, entertainment which is meaningful.
Excellent. 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 I heard an old ragman out making his rounds, coming right down my alley with sorrowful sounds, crying Ectoli, and pulling his cart. I asked him how much he'd give me for my broken heart. Ectoli, Ectoli. All he was buying was rags and old iron. I asked that old ragman how much he would pay for a heart that was broken when you went away, for a burnt out old love light that no longer beams, and a couple of slightly used second-hand dreams. Excellent, excellent. All he was buying was rags and old iron. Whatever he'd offer, I would happily take for the big empty promises you used to make, for the memories of you that are no longer sweet. I just wish he could haul them all off down the street. Excellent, excellent. All he was buying was rags and old iron. When love doesn't last, tell me, what is it worth? It was once my most precious possession on earth. Now I ask that old ragman if he'd like to buy, but he just shook his head and continued to cry. Excellent, excellent. All he was buying was rags and old iron. Excellent, 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 excellent.